Alright, let's dive into what the Eagles have been up to in free agency, but more importantly, let's talk about what it all means for their future. Because, honestly, there's a lot to unpack here, and some of these moves are more interesting than they seem on the surface. Here's the thing, if you take a step back and think about it, the Eagles' strategy this offseason feels like they're playing both the short and long game simultaneously. But are they doing enough to stay competitive? Let's break it down. First up, tight end. Personally, I think the Eagles' decision to re-sign Grant Calcaterra and likely bring back Dallas Goedert is a smart move, but it's also a bit of a band-aid solution. What many people don't realize is that this tight end group is still on shaky ground. Sure, Goedert is a solid player, but he's on a one-year deal, and the rest of the depth chart is filled with unproven guys like Cameron Latu and Johnny Munt. In my opinion, this position is still a ticking time bomb. If they don't draft someone soon, they're going to be in the same mess next year. What this really suggests is that the Eagles are kicking the can down the road, hoping to address it later. But is that a winning strategy? Now, let's talk edge defender. Losing Jaelan Phillips was a huge blow, and while Arnold Ebiketie is a decent pickup, he's no Phillips. One thing that immediately stands out is how undersized the Eagles' edge rushers are now. Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, and Ebiketie are all smaller guys. From my perspective, this could be a problem against bigger offensive lines. What makes this really interesting is that the Eagles seem to be betting on potential over proven talent. But here's the thing, potential doesn't always pan out. If Smith and Hunt don't live up to expectations, the Eagles could be in trouble. This raises a deeper question. Are they relying too much on the draft to fill this gap? I think they might be. Moving on to cornerback, the Eagles have done a solid job here. Rick Woolen on a one-year deal is a great pickup, and pairing him with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean gives them a strong trio. A detail I find fascinating is how they've structured their secondary. DeJean moving inside to the slot in nickel situations is a smart use of his versatility. But here's the catch, most of these guys are on short-term deals. So, while they're good for now, they're essentially renting talent. This feels like a win-now move, but it doesn't solve their long-term issues. Personally, I think they'll draft a corner in the mid-rounds to develop, but it's not their most pressing need. Wide receiver is where things get spicy. A.J. Brown's future is still up in the air, and I'm convinced he'll be traded at some point. What many people don't realize is that the Eagles' receiver room is thin behind Devonta Smith. Johnny Wilson is a project, and Quez Watkins is inconsistent. In my opinion, they absolutely need to draft a receiver early, but they also need a veteran presence. This is a position where they can't afford to gamble. If they lose Brown and don't add anyone, their offense could take a big hit. Finally, safety might be their biggest weakness. Andrew Mukuba has potential, but he's unproven and injury-prone. Sidney Brown hasn't lived up to expectations, and the rest of the depth chart is a question mark. What this really suggests is that the Eagles are neglecting the back end of their defense. Even with a strong cornerback group, a weak safety duo can derail everything. Personally, I think they need to sign a proven safety in free agency or trade for one. Relying on Marcus Epps or drafting someone late isn't enough. This is a position where they're playing with fire. So, where does this leave the Eagles? In my opinion, they've done just enough to stay competitive, but they're not setting themselves up for long-term success. They're patching holes instead of fixing them. If you take a step back and think about it, this feels like a team that's trying to win now without sacrificing their future, but they might end up doing both. The draft will be crucial for them, but even then, I'm not convinced they'll address all their needs. What do you think? Are the Eagles doing enough, or are they setting themselves up for trouble down the line? Let me know in the comments below.